Okay. Hi, I'm Mike Stone, and as representative of the board of the Israeli Association of Writers in English, I'm happy to introduce our chair, Professor Karen Alkalay-Gut. On the occasion of the publication of her latest book, Here Lie Poets and Their Graves, Karen has consented to reveal the quirky side of her nature and show us how it's done. Karen is Professor Emeritus at Tel Aviv University and finds research sometimes as exciting as poetry. Karen, it's all yours.
It's all mine. So it's all on me.
Yep.
I I'm very, very happy to be able to share this with you. The book is that came out in Hebrew taught me a lot about the book. And I really want to pass it on to to anyone um, who can connect to that kind of weird title and weird subject. But I want to point out just from this cover, here lie poets in their graves in English. It's so much more nuanced than it can be in Hebrew because it just suggests that tombstones may not be telling the whole truth. Uh, but as Yeats said, those final words on a tombstone may not be the most important words we can learn from a poet. See, he says this in one of his almost final, his final poem, and this is in the middle of the final poem on under Ben Bulben, which is the mountain behind his grave. He writes, though grave diggers' toil is long, sharp their spades, their muscles strong, they but thrust their buried men back in the human mind again. I think that's an important thing to begin with, that the grave is a reminder. The gravestone is a reminder. And there's a lot to be reminded of. You know. But the person I want to begin with is not Yeats. Maybe he'll come later on. But I want to begin with Allen Ginsberg because that's where everything began. Uh, we landed in Newark Airport, 5 o'clock in the morning. Who am I going to visit? My brother must be sleeping. Family, yeah, Dahlia must be sleeping. Everybody's asleep. The cafes are closed. If I check into a hotel, they won't let me in till 3 in the afternoon. So, what's the best place to go? Well, Allen Ginsberg. He gives directions. He says his family plot is right, a 5 minute walk from the airport. It's a little longer. We drove around, but we got there and we found that, the cemetery will always accept you. And here it is. Uh, we get to the we get to the cemetery, and I remember there is the last poem that Ginsberg wrote is called Death and Fame, and it begins with these lines. It's a long poem, but I'm just going to give you a few lines. When I die, I don't care what happens to my body. Throw ashes in the air, scatter them in the East River, bury an urn in Elizabeth, New Jersey, B'nai Israel Cemetery. But I want a big funeral. He's had many great ideas, but he did care a lot. Uh, and I want to show you this our first visit, as I quoted the poem. Near the scrapyard, my father'll be buried. Near Newark Airport, my father'll be. Under a Winston cigarette sign buried. On exit 14, Turnpike, New Jersey, south through the tollgate service road 1, my father buried. Past
merchants refrigerating concrete on the cat-tailed marshes, past the Budweiser Anheuser-Busch brick brewery, in Bnei Israel Cemetery, behind a green painted iron fence where there used to be a paint factory and farms, where Pennock makes chemicals now, under the Penn Central Power Station, transformers and wires at the borderline between Elizabeth and Newark, next to Aunt Rose Gaidamak, near Uncle Harry Meltzer, one grave over from Abe's wife, Anna. My father will be buried.
You can see that for him, the details of the cemetery are very important. And I really was amazed to find that he too was buried here, and it's the center of every means of communication and transportation that we have. It's airplanes, trains, everything is passing. You see the truck lane behind his family plot. Everything is there, and he's in the middle, and he tells you exactly in his poems, get off at exit 14. uh, what an amazing connection between the poetry and the grave. But then, if you look at the grave itself of Allen Ginsberg, Irwin Allen Ginsberg, he took the Jewish part of him and made sure that you knew about it. It takes a little bit of his poem of about his father, who was right next to him. Father, breath, once more farewell. Birth you gave was no thing ill. My heart is still, as time will tell. It the grave is so meaningful. It's so meaningful in English. And then you go to you if you know Hebrew, you suddenly realize that there's something on the top that says Mishorer Ador Doresh Yichud Yisrael Avram Ben Yehuda Leib Venomi. And wow, what does that mean? It took me a long time to figure out Mishorer Hador Doresh Yichud, and you know, the poet of the generation that asking for unity. And I thought, where does it come from? Who wrote it? Why would it be there in Hebrew? Allen Ginsberg himself couldn't have put it there or couldn't have planned for it to be there. And the other night I was talking about this, and Rachel Elior suddenly said, "Oh, it's the Anabachach." And I said, "What is that?" Whoops. Can we? I think we have to take our take everybody's picture but mine off, uh, so that you can see. But you can still see Dolshei HaYechudcha. It's talking about a prayer. It's a Kabbalistic prayer asking for unity, for and asking God for unity. And then we realized that that's what Allen Ginsberg did. He asked God for unity. And maybe that's why he had himself uh, uh, divided. He was cremated, and a third of his ashes are buried in the Bnei Israel cemetery. How did that happen? How cremation? Well, the cemetery was already closed. Nobody really cared. The cemetery's dead. I mean, dead in that it is no longer maintained. So, so you could get by with anything, even putting the ashes of in a talit without the tassels, putting it in the ground. Uh, and he did that, but that's only a third of his ashes. And the other, there were three parts, right? Shambhala Buddhist Center in Colorado, the Jewel Heart Center, Buddhist Center in Ann Arbor. His family's plot in B'nai Israel Cemetery in New Jersey. And he said, "Isn't that amazing?" I talked to his secretary then and said, that's just, how did that's so little, one third of his ashes. And this was Bob Rosenthal. And he said, "Oh, no, that's not all," he said. "There was another tablespoon. Uh, there was this one in the Shambhala Art Center, Mountain Center, Buddhist Center, and in the Jewel Heart. But there was also a tablespoon that I scattered in Halazetim because he asked for it." Uh, so that Allen Ginsberg is all over the world. He had said to me one time he was here a couple times, but one time I got to talk to him, and he said to me, uh, you know, um, I have a cousin who was a poet in Israel. His name was Chadam, and I'd like to visit his grave. And I was too stunned. Excuse me. I was too stunned to say, "Oh, I'll take you." It's it's in Trumpeldor in Tel Aviv. Um, and someone interrupted. We never got back to it. But I think he thought his cousin was in Harazetim, which would have been the proper place for such a distinguished poet to be. So, uh, so we have an amazing poet who kind of physically made himself the emblem of unity by separating himself. And that's quite an achievement when you think about it. And I'm going to start coughing, and that'll give me time to move on to another famous poet whose end was very different. Now, Elizabeth Barrett Browning is really known to the public through one thing: her famous sonnet from the Portuguese, the most popular sonnet from the Portuguese, that she wrote to her husband, Robert Browning, who rescued her from her father, who didn't want anyone to leave the house ever. And even though she was crippled from an accident, he took her away to Florence, and they married, and she had a child. And wow, what a great story. And how many books have been written about the Barretts, uh, and the Barrett and the love story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So let me read this to you because I think you want to get the depth of it. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men might strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with the love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall love thee better after death." Now those are pretty strong words. And here she is, married to the man of her who rescued her and who is taking care of her because she remained a cripple despite her despite her great love, and despite the fact that she had a child, and despite the fact that she was a lot much older than her husband, and lied about it a lot, as one does. Uh, and she um, she died in a very strange way. She was a Of course, she was an addict. Who wasn't in the 19th century? Everybody took laudanum for pain. And once you start taking that, you keep going. Her husband did not like it, but it happened. And she got to the point where she had to have morphine, and she had to have more morphine and more morphine. She also had tuberculosis, and one night she died. Now, she had a doctor who happened to be out of town. She had a maid who had night off. Her uh, medication was taken care of by Robert, her husband, who was also a poet, but he never had the reputation while he was married to her. He was never really popular. You know, he wrote these poems, these strange poems about uh, dead wives, uh, killing off dead wives. I wouldn't have given him my medications, right? Anyway, he she died. He said he told everyone that her last words were, "It's marvelous." Uh, and she died. He said she died in a tubercular coughing fit. I don't think you usually say it's wonderful, it's marvelous when you're coughing yourself to death. But okay, so we have some questions about uh, Robert and his relationship to Elizabeth. Now, this is the grave. He left the country immediately afterwards. Uh, uh, Immediately after she died, there was a funeral, and he and his son left for England, where he became a very famous poet. Um, Now you look at this amazing structure, and you say, what's missing? If you look at it, you may notice that her name is missing. Uh, that's an interesting problem. Uh, Lord Leighton was the designer of the grave, but he was mostly in England, and the guy who actually did the building was someone who didn't know anything about English poetry or anything about Elizabeth. So he did what he felt like doing, and they tried to patch up some of it, but it didn't come out very much like Elizabeth. If you take a look at you see the picture in the middle, the frieze of Elizabeth Browning, and you say, wait a minute, does she look like that? Uh, well, no, she always wore curls over her face because she, in disguising her age, uh, kept her sunken cheeks hidden. She also, she wore her hair loose. She was also thin. And if you look at her and her, the frieze on her grave, she didn't have a braid in the back of her head. She wasn't thin, and she never showed her ears or her cheeks. So, okay. So we have this problem with what the grave looked like. Robert Browning never visited it. Even though he himself died in Venice. He was taken back to England to be buried, not to Florence. I don't blame him because the cemetery is is on a traffic island. Has it is right now on a traffic island. It was being constructed when all this was going on, but it didn't it was accessible. Now it's almost inaccessible. Uh, you have to, if you look up a map, you can see that you can't you have to park somewhere far away and then walk and wait for this incredibly long traffic light to let you to get to that uh, grave. But uh, nevertheless, he could have, if he had wanted, brought her to Westminster Abbey, where she belonged, where she had been accepted. Westminster Abbey, where the Poets' Corner. In fact, he himself. Whoops, I'm going to skip that part unless you ask me later. Uh, this is in one of his poems. Oh, thou soul of my soul, I shall clasp thee again, and with God be at rest. That's the only mention or reference to her. Uh, but in Westminster Abbey, there he is, big, with the big stone on the ground. Uh, um, 20 years later, his son added the part on the bottom. His wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, is buried in Florence. That's the only connection. Now, you tell me, you want to go back to that love poem? uh, there is a disconnect somewhere, and it could be the disconnect of his great grief at having to overdose his wife because of her pain. It may have been a mutual agreement. It may have been murder. It may have been a mistake. But there is something funny about that grave. So, if there's something funny about a grave, I have to look at it. Uh, and it tells you something about how you really can't tell. And sometimes a grave will help you understand it, but maybe not. Maybe not. I'd love to talk about this more, but I mean, if you've read Robert Browning's My Last Duchess, if you've read any poems of his where he talks, where there's a speaker who is male, and he's talking about or to a dead woman, and it became the fashion, the dramatic monologue. It gives the space to the poet to have to express himself, because the woman is not able to answer. So we can talk about love, and we can talk about unfaithfulness. We can talk about lots of different things. Uh, but it is a problem if you're talking about a relationship. How about Walt Whitman? I'm afraid to talk about him because everyone thinks he's so amazing, and he really is. Let me show you. He designed his own grave. You can see that this was his grave. He had been asked by Harley Cemetery to be buried there. It was near his house. It wasn't that far away. And it was a good idea, because they paid for the plot, and then he could just, he could just raise money for the grave, and it would be, everything okay. And it looks like a cute little house. It's very modest little house. But then I went there, and somehow it didn't look so modest.
I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me, look for me under your boot soles. I take a little longer because it was very hard for me to get down that mountain. But got the idea. Let's try. Walt Whitman may have killed 4,000. Walt Whitman may have said, I am under your boot soles, but he paid $4,000 for this mausoleum. More than 2 times what he had paid for his own house. See how solid it is. Concrete. He oversaw the building of this mausoleum. It was very much involved in. Why here? Because people from Harley Cemetery came to him thinking that this cemetery built in 1865 would really use his business, would really benefit from his business. So Walt Whitman, agreed to it. But he isn't under our good souls. He's in a mausoleum the size of this house. While I fall down from point out structure portrait of William Blake called Death's Door. Now take a look at this stuff. After his death, his parents were brought here, the remains of his parents, his 2 brothers, and his nephew. Baby nephew. But he isn't alone. This is his family. In this mausoleum. A great individuals who became a family man. The end of his life. All right. Just look at the pictures. I'm sorry about the noise. I thought I had cut the noise of leaves out. But you can see that he brought his whole family to be with him. And you remember that he's always quoted as saying, I lie under the grass waiting for you. It's not exactly under the grass. However, his place is a center, and people, children come and read poetry here. This is, even though it's not in the middle of, not in the middle of a famous place, people do come to Walt Whitman to see him and to be inspired by him. So in a way, this enormous grave does serve the purpose of inspiration or egotism. Let me end with Yeats, because Yeats is the was the beginning here. William Butler Yeats. I think that most of you know that he was 73 when he died. He had already won the Nobel Prize. He was a state senator. He was the probably one of the most important influences in the creation of the Irish Free State. He believed and worked with people to create a culture, something that is very important for any country, that any new country, to create a culture, to create a history, to create a legend. And he worked on this in his poetry, in his plays, and in his politics. Unfortunately, very right wing, um, but nevertheless very significant. Now, you know that his last poem probably is the poem. It's not his last poem. It was going to be the last poem in his book until he changed it to get something more upbeat. And the last part of it describes his grave. The mountain in the background is Ben Bulben, and the cemetery is Drumcliff's churchyard. And this is what he wrote. Under bare Ben Bulben's head, in Drumcliff churchyard, Yeats is laid. An ancestor was rector there long years ago. A church stands near. By the road, an ancient cross, not marble, no conventional phrase, on limestone quarried near the spot. By his command, these words are cut. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horsemen pass by. So it was always his dream to be buried in Drumcliff's churchyard. He had grown up with his grandparents there in that area with all the legends and the fairies and the all the stories of Ireland, and he always wanted to be part of it. Unfortunately, unfortunately, he too had bad lungs like Elizabeth Barrett Browning and had to leave and went to the south of France to Roqueburn for his health, where he died. This is exactly what happened to actually most of the poets that had tuberculosis in English. Uh, they wound up going to Italy or somewhere south and dying, and not getting better. But the grave was part of what he wanted. He wanted the culture. He wanted to be in the middle of the culture of the legends, and he would be part of that legend. But he was very ill, and he knew he was dying in France. And he said to his wife, "Well, it's 1939, as you can see. Um, there seems to be some, political problems, maybe some military problems coming up. Why don't you bury me here for a while if I die? Don't bury me if I don't die. If I die, bury me here for a year, and then when it's over, plant me in Sligo where where my grave is." And of course, she agreed to this, but World War II intervened. Um, she buried him here in Rockburn Cap Martin near Menton, where you could see a great cemetery. You can see the sea if you're alive. Um, you can see the Mediterranean, and it's very beautiful. Unfortunately, because of the war, they didn't get back until 1948. That's a long time. And the love of the son of the love of his life, Maud Gunn, uh, Sean McBride, was now foreign minister, was Minister of Affairs, so he could take over and say, let's get the grave back. Let's get Yates back home. And we're gonna get Yates back home, and we're gonna do it properly. Unfortunately, she didn't realize, his wife, that she had only rented the grave for 5 years, that she hadn't bought the grave. So after 5 years, as was custom in the area, they took out the bones and put them in the charnel house in the ossuary and mixed them up. So when in 1948 they came to rebury him, they had to figure out who belonged to what. And they didn't have DNA, and they didn't have all the details. And look, um, look at the funeral first. I probably should not be showing this because I didn't ask for permission from the Irish Times, but I'll skip through. This is the funeral in France, and his body is blessed. And then we move to the port, where he is taken abroad and saluted, and then we move to we move to Galway in Ireland, where his body is received, and he gets a celebration, a military celebration for him. And he's taken to, by foot and by procession, he is taken north. I think it's about a 7-hour walk, but they say that it just he didn't have to walk. Anyway, they took him to the cemetery. He was in Sligo, where he is um, uh, crowds accompanied him. The only problem is that we have the question starts coming up 40 years later or so. Is Yates really there? And it looks like it isn't. It looks like, well, Louis MacNeice, the poet, at the time of the burial in 1948, the reburial, Louis MacNeice said, I think that they probably have the bones of a Belgian dentist with a club foot. But he was the only one saying that. But in 2015, they started saying that in public. In 1948, when what was it? One of his late lovers. He had a lot of lovers. Even at the end, one of his most recent lovers, Edith Shackleton, held, and her lover, Hannah Gluckstein, went to visit the grave and found that there was no one in the grave, and that it had been moved to an ossuary, and they warned everyone and said, he's not there. He's not there. You can't bring him back to Ireland. But nobody wanted to listen to him, so they had this ceremony, which turned out to be somebody else's bones, probably. Now, we'll never know this because the family refused to dig him up. And they said, what difference does it make? And maybe that's what
Yeats would have said, though grave diggers' toil is long, sharp their spades, their muscles strong, they but thrust their buried men back in the human mind again. And here he is back in the human mind. Uh, who cares if he's in, you know, in this grave or that grave? He's in our minds. So my last words on this subject for the moment is I'll go back and read the poems. Read the poetry. It's much better than a trip to the cemetery. The person may not be there, and even if he is, he doesn't need you. Uh, so thank you. And now I'm gonna stop this sharing business, and I'm gonna look at you. Uh,
Thank you, Karen. If anyone would like to ask Karen something or comment on her presentation, please raise your hand or send a message. We'll allow 15 to 20 minutes for this. Please be considerate of others who also have questions.
Yeah,
Mike.
Got one.
Yeah, okay.
Uh-oh.
Wendy?
yeah. That was fascinating. Really, you feel you learn more about the life of these poets through their graves, and it was so fascinating. I just wondered whether you thought of doing this about the Hebrew poets. I know when I went to the Canary Cemetery and saw the grave of Rachel, and many of the graves around her are actually her lovers and different people she was connected with. And then, of course, really in the end, they all abandoned her when she was so ill. And it made me think that one could continue this theme.
Yes. You know why I stayed away from Hebrew writers? Because of the Chevre Kadisha.
Ah,
They're orderly. They know who they're burying, and they know why they're burying. Um, but even with Rachel, there are little alterations. Rachel is buried in front of, right behind her is a poet named Elisheva, um, who isn't Jewish, but everyone said she wrote Hebrew. She's Jewish enough for this. But in Israel, everything is clarified. Everything is in order. So you're not going to get the wrong body. You're not going to get someone making an incredibly elaborate grave because we we kind of keep them down and worry about the space more than anything else. So that's why I didn't. It may be the wrong thing because, as you point out, there's some of them are really amazing, and um, you know, Trumpeldor Cemetery is right near me is full of prospects, lots of poets. Because in that time, poets were really respected, so they got big graves, Bialik, like they got graves like Whitman. Uh, so maybe someone else who was less afraid of the Chevra Kadisha and stepping on their fate would be interested in doing that. Could be quite fascinating.
I agree with Wendy that there's got to be some very interesting stories buried in our graves, also in
Yeah,
Israeli graves.
right. There you go. You've got a book. Uh, Sean.
Yeah. So, first of all, amazing book. Congratulations on this. I'm wondering, was there any poet that you're particularly fond of that isn't in the book that you would have liked to include?
Everybody. I mean, there's so many people. Some people because I didn't get to their graves, but some people because I didn't know I couldn't get to the story. And the book is about stories. Uh, there are a lot of Yiddish poets with really interesting stories that in New York.
who are not, their graves were not as organized by the Chevra Kadisha as in Israel, and the stories they have are really uh, quite amazing. The things that they wrote on their graves and things that happened to them. Uh, but I started saying before we began that I wanted to write about Anne Sexton, who uh, uh, I couldn't
Committed
get a
suicide.
story
Yeah.
out of it, and I didn't want to write about Sylvia Plath because everybody has written about her grave. Um, so there are things like that. There are two poets who influenced me a lot, and I didn't want to go near them. Um, and I'm sorry about that. Maybe I should have, Son of Poets in Their Graves, another book. Uh, but was there someone you were interested in?
um,
You thought I
no,
would
just
write
sort of curious as like if there were any anyone in particular besides Sexton and Plath that you couldn't access for some reason, like if there was some kind of logistical problem or that the story wasn't readily accessible. Is that something that you might write about like later?
Yeah, yeah. There are people I might write about. Uh,
Okay.
uh, I mean, there's the British have poets organized in Westminster Abbey, right? So you think everybody who, British poets are all organized? Well, Coleridge's grave was only discovered 5 years ago.
Mm.
It was discovered behind a wine cellar wall. I don't know how that happened. I don't know, but that's something that someone might be interested in finding out more. Um, American poets are much more interesting because there's just so many different ways that people. E. Cummings, for example, was buried in a corner of the family plot of his third wife in a with a sign this big, just like his poetry.
Amazing.
Has the modesty of that he that he contained. Uh, but there's a lot left to do. People are dying all the time.
How
Uh,
many poems are in the book? How many graves?
um, in the book right now, there's 16. Dvora, tell me if I'm telling the truth. Dvora is my editor in Hebrew, and she made me write more. I had fewer poets, and she made me every time I mentioned a poet and said I didn't write about it. Uh, she said, "Well, you have to write about Dorothy Parker." I'm not, no, I don't want to write about it. But then it turns out to be extremely exciting. Everything that she suggested.
I don't think Dvora is still here.
She had a poem thing with her
Yeah,
grandchildren,
yeah, yeah.
I think
but
she's muted.
it was her fault. Just as it was my brother's fault, Joe, for my starting it, and mm, Ezzy's my husband's fault for going with me to all these places. I mean, he as he nearly fainted on Melville's grave uh, from food poisoning. Well, you fell down, right? Almost. So,
The
it was
stories never end. Wow.
just,
Wow.
yeah. But there are many more stories to tell. Uh, Simon.
Yeah. Did you find out who added that quote on Ginsberg's grave?
Uh,
Joseph, would you like to answer that question?
Yes. So it turns out that that was Rabbi Zalman ben Schachter Shlomi, who died a few years ago. And I called him up while he was still alive, of course, and asked him about the quote. And he said, yes, indeed, he did. And I said, how did you have to write a quote about Allen Ginsberg? And he said, oh, he did a number of gigs together with him in the past. Very striking. For those who don't know, Shlomo was originally a Lubavitcher, I think, and he became a something different. He still was quite observant, but he was organized a lot of Judaism components of mysticism and spirituality and things. But one thing was very surprising that I learned from you now that the first part, Misharer Hador, that's very clear, is singer of the generation. But the second part is Dorshei Yichud. I didn't know that's a phrase from Ana B'Korach, and I'm surprised that Shlomo didn't mention that to me, that he took it from there.
Okay.
So I don't know whether he intended it to mean that he was a seeker. Not I interpret Doresh as seeker rather than asker, but that he was a seeker of God's unity. I think he was just a seeker of unity. He wanted to bring people together, and I think that's what Shlomo meant, and that's probably why he didn't mention that he had stolen the phrase from Ana B'Korach.
Right. Right. Because the prayer is asking God to be the seeker for unity. And here, this is referring to Ginsburg as a seeker for unity, uh, which is very appropriate still.
Very
Uh,
appropriate, but very different from what it is
yeah.
in the original source.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that there are 16 poets. It took me like I'm here. Yeah, it took me like 5 minutes to unmute myself. So yeah, so there are 16 poets. I thought there were 15, but then you added Corso, the last one. So you're right. There's 16.
Oh, Gregory Corso.
Yeah.
Right. 16 poets. And if Dvorah hadn't pushed me, there would have been 12.
I should push you more. I would like to hear many more stories.
There are many more stories.
Yeah.
When you started, did you know how many there were going to be, or was there kind of association that one led to another? When people knew that you were interested in the subject.
Are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording.
All right, it's already, it doesn't matter anyway. I started finding out that I could get travel money by going to graves far away. So I got interested in it. But also, I mean, every time we went to a grave, and maybe I didn't even think about writing about it, but yeah, it's on the way. There was a story. We went to Oscar Wilde, for example, in Père Lachaise, which everybody goes to Père Lachaise if you go to France, if you go to Paris. So we went there, and then a year after that, I think, or 2 years after that, it became popular suddenly to kiss Oscar Wilde's grave wearing a lot of lipstick. And so his grave was covered with kissing lips all over. And it turned out that lipstick destroys concrete. and they had to clean up the grave at a great expense and put a plexiglass frame around it so that people wouldn't kiss the grave anymore. And then they kissed the plexiglass, and and nobody knows how that happened. But it meant, you have to go back to see Oscar Wilde and see every year there's something new.
Love conquers all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice, very interesting experience to see that a grave doesn't die. And this is true in a couple of the graves that we talked about.
Did you have any grave of somebody who was happily married and is buried next to his wife or her husband?
No, I only wrote about poets.
Yeah, no, I mean poet.
Ricky, I have no memory of a happily married person except perhaps Herman Melville, who did write a lot of poetry, and he wasn't happily married, but his wife took care of him. He was a little uh, depressive, so then you have to start analyzing what is happily married.
Yeah,
Uh,
what is happy period.
No,
yeah.
I've seen graves in which husbands and wives are not buried just next to each other, but on top of each other.
In Israel,
Yes.
in
In his,
Israel,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that's right.
In Romania, there's a cemetery. I think it's called the Happy Cemetery, where there's a little story on every. I think in rhymes about what how the person died or why or who he was.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Wow.
But I think that
Yeah.
sorry,
Sorry.
but one of the reasons that husbands and wives may be buried on top of one another is because there was a twofer.
That might be.
And
Yeah.
I'm not joking
Yes.
about
No,
that.
no, yeah.
I actually inquired
Uh-huh.
about graves, right? And that was the twofer deal.
No, it's also cheaper, and sometimes, maybe they didn't think about getting an extra plot, when the first one died. But yeah, 2-4 is a good explanation too.
It's a twofer.
Uh-huh.
Yes, but it's a trend now because to save space.
Yes, yes, yes.
I know when my husband passed away, and they offered me, I'll be
Uh,
on.
yeah,
It gives me a funny feeling when I go to visit the grave, but
yeah. Yes.
uh,
But I think it's two coffins on top of each other. I'm not sure that they
no,
even
no,
save on the coffin. No?
Coffins.
Huh?
What coffins?
No coffins. No
I know
coffins.
No
coffins.
coffins.
Yeah,
That's,
no coffins in Israel.
that's right. That's right. That's right. All
No,
right, Eddie, I
that's
forgot.
not so. That's not so. In
Uh,
Misgav, in the area that I live, people are buried in coffins.
uh-huh.
There's some,
Or can
yeah,
request.
there's a story about,
Or they can request it.
Yeah.
well, here the deal is that they said that there's wolves in the forest because the local cemetery is in a forest. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's what they do.
Mm.
But in Carmiel, on the other hand, there's a wall, that it's a wall. It's not on the ground.
Uh-huh.
draw.
Right.
It's pretty hard.
A mausoleum. A
Wrinkles,
mausoleum. Yeah,
Yeah.
mausoleum.
No, they're cupboards. They're not mausoleums. They're cupboards. They have them in
Cupboards.
Jerusalem too.
Yeah,
Uh,
And
yeah,
They're basically so
space.
shelves,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah.
But
um,
Shoeboxes.
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 it's pretty
Yeah.
hard shoving somebody in a drawer.
Yeah,
there's
Karen,
there is a
you've
stretch.
uncovered such an interesting field. I can think of cemeteries in general, the types of cemeteries. Somebody can write an encyclopedia. It's Germany, the Wannsee Cemetery,
Right.
not the Wannsee, Weissensee, I think it's called, the Jewish cemetery in East Berlin. It's the whole history of German jewelry. You can spend a day there and you'll learn more than in a textbook.
Yeah.
Mm.
Plus,
I
a
think-
cemetery plagued by wolves is the beginning of an awesome poem.
Yeah, that's the way your mind works. It's
A
interesting.
really good story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
my Russian immigrant family told me when they immigrated that in Russia, this was in Siberia, in Novosibirsk, that when when someone died, they would actually take the body home on the bus. And yes, if they had enough money for a grave, they would buy the grave and someone would stand in the grave until they brought the body
Wow.
so that nobody stole it. The
Is
grave
that where
body.
we get the modern tradition of people standing in parking spaces in Tel Aviv waiting for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
car to come in?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's where it comes from.
Oh, I thought
Right.
you were going to say the ground was so frozen that they had to keep them at home until the spring.
No, no,
And
no. What they did in Siberia is that they would wrap them up in plastic and hang them high on a tree
Oh, God.
until they
Until yes,
Until
until
the
spring.
what?
Till the
that,
spring.
that's a great idea for another book.
yes.
How
Yeah.
the dead
I
are
think
treated. Yes.
Aaron, I remember that we went to another cemetery in New Jersey,
oh
and I don't
yes,
remember whose it was.
it was William Carlos Williams.
William, so
Ah.
We
did
went
he
there and
make it
we
into
took
your book?
pictures, and he's not in the book.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
I don't have.
I remember that we went to the cemetery office and we said we were looking for a grave, and they assumed that we were looking for the grave of a rock star who had been buried there. And when we
Right.
mentioned who we were looking for, they said, "Oh, no one ever visits that grave."
Exactly. Exactly. That's what happened when first this idea may have come many years ago when Ed Abramson went to he told me he went to the cemetery where Melville was buried and he wanted to find it and tr make a tribute to Melville, and he couldn't find the grave, and he finally found someone working there, and he said, "Could you help me find Melville's grave?" And the guy said, "Who's Melville?" And he said, "He's the guy that wrote Moby Dick." And the worker said, I have no idea." And he called up the the main office, and he said, "Herman Melville, he's the guy that wrote Moby Dicks." And they nobody knew who he was or where he was. And when we got there, of course, as he finally went with me, we went and we found the grave, and it's an empty scroll. There's a lot of scrolls in that grave, in that cemetery, and his is empty. It has his name underneath, but there's nothing in the scroll that says, Herman Melville, author, da 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 da.
Not even from hell's heart I stab at thee.
Nope, nothing.
Wow, that's a missed opportunity.
Mm.
I mean, that's a quote.
No, yeah, nothing is there. And it's a family plot, so there's everyone's around there. It is quite amazing. What Debbie was saying before about Siberia, their graves are being discovered, like Peretz Malkish, who was a very important Yiddish poet. His grave was only discovered 3-4 years ago, and he had been killed in the in the 50s. So Siberia is probably a very good place to look for trees, dead bodies. Yeah, and I'm sure that
Especially with
share as well.
Especially with global warming now, it's going to be a lot easier to find them.
She lived that long.
Dropping from the tree. Oh, this is getting very. We're getting a very.
No, it'd be interesting to have a course. This is a topic of an interesting course in university or even in high school to get people interested in writing from the ground up.
From the ground up, exactly.
Yeah.
The one of the problems of poetry, at least, is that people don't relate to the poem immediately because they don't understand it, and they don't know anything about the person. So this is one way of getting into the poem. I mean, one way of understanding Elizabeth Barrett Browning's love poetry is to look at a very touchy love affair.
Yeah, you destroyed that poem for me. Oh, I would love it. I'll never regard it the same way.
But
How do I love thee? Not like that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
nice idea. I think that, but I think that it was a love story. It was a love story, but it was also a murder story. And you can,
Yeah.
You
what
know
was that?
what? You know what?
Guns N' Roses. I used to love her, but I had to kill her. Sorry.
But Ricky, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't think of it as destroying it for you because maybe it could be she was in such agony and such, dismal
Yeah.
situation physically that he did her a favor. Okay,
That's what it
can
was.
be an act of love. It can
Yeah.
be,
True.
can
yeah.
be.
And it could have
Yeah.
been with her consent. She may have
Yeah,
wanted that.
yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
may well have been with her consent,
Yeah, but
and
then,
maybe her initiation.
Robert Browning never came to visit the grave. So,
Well, there is
Guilt will
that.
do that for you.
Yeah.
There's not sure. I'm not sure why he didn't go to visit her grave, but it's a saving of what Judith Weil wrote, a saving of one's love. Is that the pain is also love. Uh, so
Mhm.
it's not that it's not as maudlin as I made it out
Mhm.
out to be in this question. This may be a true love story, but it also has an element of guilt and of pain that
Yeah,
I don't think people
Well,
acknowledge in most times.
even if he were protecting her, which I imagine he was, he would still feel guilty. I mean, you
yeah,
Yes.
make decisions in your life about people that you're looking after, and even if it's the right decision, you will probably feel guilty.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so,
Yeah.
Mike, how can we possibly know why he never went back to the grave, and how can
no,
we know that he didn't?
no, you're right. Well,
That's
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 just
true.
what Karen
traveler.
had, was
Well,
reflecting what Karen had said.
because it hasn't
We
been
don't know.
documented. Because it isn't documented doesn't mean to say he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Mhm. No, this is I think the documentation was from his son, Penn.
But do your children
But
know everything about you?
right. Hope not.
No,
There you go.
no, no. And better off that way.
Mm.
Yes.
Karen, you said
Uh,
something that you mentioned a drug that everybody was on in those days. What did you say?
oh, laudanum.
Lord,
Laudanum was something that, something you drank, laudanum. Uh, I think that everybody had it. Um, Rossetti was addicted. Swinburne was addicted. They were all addicted to it.
Coleridge, wasn't Coleridge
Oh,
well, that
sure. He
was,
was
same when he wrote
opium.
yeah,
Opium.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
and there was belladonna too that they used, but
Oh,
that was
yeah, you're right.
so
Belladonna was a laxative.
That they've used since the
No,
Renaissance.
belladonna
Yeah.
was also a painkiller.
yeah, all
Yeah.
right.
Painkiller, and it also
And a regular
And
uh,
killer.
poison.
it also was, instead of eye makeup,
I know,
it
Yeah,
was
because
a
it
call it
increased the
belladonna.
size of your pupils,
Belladonna,
yes,
yeah.
and that was more attractive to men.
yes.
I'm thinking about what you said about Melville. I'm thinking, damn, I mean, Melville, he wrote Moby Dick for heaven's sakes. People still read Moby Dick, and he's forgotten in a corner somewhere.
Well,
Yes.
Sometimes that happens, and then again, sometimes you have a situation like Arik Einstein's grave, that people go to it to visit it to pay homage, and they sing his songs next to it. That's the thing that
yeah,
people do.
Yes.
So there's that and there's that.
But
Yeah.
some creatives are also like, would you people just leave me alone already? I just go away. Why do you keep coming here and leaving flowers 150 years later? I'm trying to sleep here.
You should write that on your tombstone.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the Russian immigrants, I've noticed it in the Rehovot Cemetery, very often put an etching on the
Yeah.
graves.
Yeah.
Or
The whole
photograph.
picture, they look there,
And
they
there's
are.
a picture in the engraving of their portraits. Yeah,
Oh, that's very eerie.
yeah, but they do. But
It's very eerie because
I-
I mean, in Israel, there are lots like that, and it's
Yeah.
like the person's staring
yeah.
at you from beyond.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the
You see-
ones that have the videos that that
I-
are
Mm.
that start because when you step next to them,
I've never
hello,
seen.
welcome. Um, those are the even worse.
Yeah.
You
We're
have
probably going to have hologram graves in like
Um,
10, 20 years.
Yeah.
the husband of who was a poet of Anne Rice, Stan Rice.
Mm.
In New Orleans, he has a mausoleum the size of my bedroom.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's got his poetry is all over the walls where they're and I didn't write about it because it was too weird, but I mean there's all kinds of ways that you you can have someone
Well, you heard this
put
new
away.
thing in America with AI that they're recreating people
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
from
I
That's
was
right.
going to
photographs,
say
and
that.
they somebody wouldn't know the person was dead
Yeah.
because when they're speaking, they recreate their voice, their movements.
Oh, let's
There's
do
no way that can go wrong at all.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that whatever happens after this, there are going to be some poems and stories and maybe a little short video that about the subject. Whatever happens to us or whatever happens to this video, I have this feeling that at the very least, Sean is going to write.
But the wolves in the forest.
And Alex is going to have something to say, and I have this feeling that the dead inspire us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. And
Somebody in Japan married an AI.
No.
oh yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes.
It was in the
Well,
news.
they date these. They used to 20 years ago in Japan quite often. They date these rubber plastic.
Yeah.
They take them out.
Well, that's perfectly understandable, but not to marry them.
Yeah.
That's fine though. At least
Have
they
a
leave
casual
single women alone.
relationship.
A robot is fine, but an AI.
No, I actually think that that's okay because at least they leave real women alone after that.
Yeah. That's right.
I'm like, if you don't have the social skills to date real people, go date an AI and, don't bother the actual ladies.
That's
Yeah,
right.
It's fine.
very
People will
true.
do anything for love.
I won't do that.
No, there's another story. I think we should be thinking about an anthology here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoon River. Spoon River.
Just in this group. And I want to thank you all very much for giving me wonderful dreams tonight.
Yeah.
And
I
not
think we
thinking
should
about
stop
the war
recording
for
now.
a single moment until just now.
Yeah.
Karen, I'm going to stop recording now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This has been recorded. This
Say good night. Yes, this is recorded.